All right, I'm about to show you four cars. One of them is an SUV, another is a Kia rebadged as a Genesis, one is a Ford I actually used to own, and the last is a luxury limousine. At first glance, this seems like the most random comparison ever, but trust me, it makes total sense. Here's why. Every single one of these cars has over 320 horsepower and can hit 0 to 60 miles per hour in 5 seconds or less. You might be thinking, that's it. Those numbers don't sound crazy, and that right there is exactly what I'm talking about. Cars today are faster than they've ever been. We've got luxury limousines with over 560 horsepower and family SUVs pushing 700 horsepower. That made me stop and wonder, why? How did we get here? To answer that, we need to rewind all the way back to when cars were first made. Enter the Benz patent motor car Model 1, the first car ever. This thing had a mind-boggling, neck-breaking, physics-defying 0.75 horsepower from a single-cylinder, four-stroke engine. But hey, at the time, it was the fastest car in the world. Also, the only car in the world. Now, let's jump ahead a few decades to 1970. This is the Jaguar E-Type with a V12 engine hitting 0 to 60 in 5.5 seconds. Pretty quick, right? Fast forward to 1974, and we've got the Porsche 911 Turbo, also known as the Widowmaker. It was slightly quicker than the Jag, doing 0 to 60 in 5.4 seconds. These two, along with a bunch of others, were considered the fastest cars of the 70s. But here's where things get crazy. The four cars I showed you at the start? Yeah, they're even faster. What? We're talking about regular, everyday cars with better acceleration than the fastest sports cars from just a few decades ago. How did that happen? It's almost unbelievable, but here's the thing. We still don't think it's fast enough. Take this, for example. A Chinese company called Gore made a car called the T2, which looks a lot like a Land Rover Defender. It has around 250 horsepower, which isn't bad at all. But guess what? People complained that it wasn't enough. And they complained so much that Gore actually went ahead and released something absolutely ridiculous. Meet the Gore Crashout. What is it, you ask? Just a random Chinese electric car with 1,572 horsepower. Yes, you read that right. A Bugatti Chiron has 1,578 horsepower. And this thing is just 6 horsepower short of that. In what world is that necessary? My world. I likey. But let's be real. That much power in the wrong hands? It's basically a weapon of mass destruction. Oh, and here's the kicker. It's not even a full EV. It has a 208 horsepower engine that acts as a generator, making it a hybrid system. And this isn't some one-off case. There are plenty of examples like it. So the big question is, how did we even get to this point? The answer is actually pretty simple. Technology. Since the moment the word technology came into existence, we've been improving it. That's just how humans are wired. We don't move backward, we only move forward. And that progress has made cars insanely fast compared to what they used to be. Think about it. The fastest cars from 40 or 50 years ago are now basically regular traffic. Not because they're bad cars, but because performance standards have completely changed. A huge part of that is superchargers and turbochargers, which have improved exponentially since the 70s and 80s. Better turbos and superchargers mean better performance. Pair that with more aerodynamic designs, better transmissions, better tires, and in some cases, hybrid tech. And suddenly, even a regular sedan is outrageously quick. Speaking of performance, can we take a moment to appreciate transmissions? They don't get nearly enough love, but trust me, they make all the difference. And I'll prove it right now with one example, the Porsche 911 Turbo S 992 generation. I'm 100% sure you've seen multiple Car Wow drag races. You know the drill. Some cars are down on power compared to their rivals, yet they still manage to smoke the competition off the line. A perfect example, the Porsche 911 Turbo S. Despite not having the most horsepower, it rips through a quarter mile in just 10.2 seconds.
Oh, a dollar!
The GTR Nismo is another great example, but there's something I purposely didn't mention. Both of these cars are pretty light. Not necessarily lighter than their competitors, but still light enough to make a difference. It's obvious. Weight plays a major role in car performance. The heavier the car, the harder it has to work to go fast. And if you've looked into high-performance hybrids, you'll notice one thing. They're heavy. It makes sense. A hybrid system requires a motor and a battery pack, and those things aren't light. BMW M5 G90, 2.5 tons and 717 horsepower. AMG GT63's E-Performance, 2.3 tons and 843 horsepower. That's insane. If you told someone 20 years ago that sedans would have 700 plus horsepower, sometimes even 800 plus, they'd think you were crazy. But that's the world we live in now. Power! We know cars have gotten faster. We know technology has advanced. But now I'm asking, where does it stop? Speed limits have increased over the decades. But let's be real, a family car capable of hitting 160, 170, even 190 miles per hour is never going to stretch its legs unless you live on the Autobahn. So why keep making them faster? It all comes down to regulations. Manufacturers are now forced to meet certain emission standards, and in some cases that means making hybrids. But let's be honest, a hybrid performance car won't sell just because it's a hybrid. So what do car makers do? They slap on a ton of horsepower to make it appealing. More power equals more headlines. It's basically a marketing stunt now. Want to save millions on advertising? Just throw 1,500 horsepower in it and boom, instant attention. But hey, be careful. Swapping it for a 4-cylinder hybrid and then trying to convince people that this is what they wanted. Looking at you, AMG. Okay, we've talked about why performance cars keep getting stronger, but now let's talk about ordinary cars. Because let's be real, even regular cars have gotten ridiculously powerful. To keep things fair, I'll use a car I used to own, the Mazda CX-5. This is just a normal, everyday SUV for normal, everyday people. But guess what? It had 250 horsepower. Now, let's rewind 30 years and compare it to another regular car from back then, the 1995 Honda CR-V. That thing had 128 horsepower, just over half the power of the CX-5. Was all that extra power necessary? Probably not. But was it useful? Absolutely. More power makes highway driving smoother and more efficient, since the engine doesn't have to work as hard. Plus, modern cars are heavier because of all the safety tech, so they need more power just to keep up. And as a side effect, we now have faster daily drivers. I'm not complaining. I was planning to end the video here, but I couldn't pass up the chance to show you some everyday, unsuspecting cars with ridiculous power, while also teasing my next video. How about a luxury limousine, a sedan built for CEOs and executives, but with a 6.6-liter V12 pumping out over 600 horsepower?
Please,
Yeah, it exists.